If your child appeared on a video call, crying, barely able to speak, saying they were being held at a police station and needed money immediately to be released, what would you do in the first 40 minutes? Would you verify the technology, or would you save your child first? That question sounds hypothetical, but for one family in California, it became real. And what makes this story terrifying is not the amount of money they lost. It is the fact that every signal the human brain has learned to recognize truth aligned perfectly and told them this was real. The call came in the evening. No warning. The caller name was correct. The face on the screen was so familiar it required no thought. Their son spoke fast, breathing heavily, eyes filled with panic. The cold lighting of the room behind him looked exactly like what you would expect in a government building. The audio carried slight distortion, the kind you hear in a real emergency video call. Nothing was too perfect. And that was exactly why everything felt perfect. The human brain does not judge reality based on a single signal. It relies on agreement across multiple signals at once. The image matched memory. The voice matched habit. The emotion matched the situation. When everything aligns, the brain stops questioning. It switches into action mode. That is not gullibility. That is the instinct to protect family. Many people believe only the naive get scammed. That if you look closely enough, you can tell something is fake. That deep fakes only fool older people or those unfamiliar with technology. But in 2025, official warnings from US authorities showed the opposite. Criminals are deliberately choosing live video calls because they create something victims cannot resist. Proof of life right in front of their eyes. In this case, the scammers did not need a long story. They only needed to recreate a situation so familiar that the brain filled in the rest. An accident, a police station, time pressure. Do not hang up. Do not call anyone else. Resolve this immediately. Everything was designed to make the victim believe that every second of delay would make things worse. 40 minutes later, the money was gone. The call ended. And only when the silence arrived did the family begin to feel that something was wrong. They called their son back. No signal. They checked. And then the truth appeared in the most brutal way possible. Their son was at home, asleep, safe. This story is not about who is more foolish than whom. It raises a far more uncomfortable question. When images and voices are no longer evidence, what do we have left to trust? My name is Dolan. I study financial fraud and human manipulation in the modern technological environment. I do not stand with banks. I do not stand with technology platforms. I stand with ordinary families who believe that if they live carefully, risk will stay far away from them. In reality, it will not. This game is designed so that ordinary people lose from the very beginning. If you are listening to this story and think that family was simply unlucky, this part will force you to reconsider, because this scam did not succeed because of technology. It succeeded because of how the human brain behaves under emergency pressure. We need to call this by its correct name. This is not just a deep fake. It is the combination of 3 layers of technology and 1 layer of psychology. The first layer is voice cloning. With just a few minutes of audio from social media, old videos, or voice messages, AI systems can recreate a familiar voice and its natural rhythm. The second layer is real-time facial impersonation, where the face on screen is not a pre-recorded video, but a live reacting face synchronized to speech. The third layer is a carefully staged environment that gives the brain no reason to object. Correct lighting. Reasonable camera angle, just enough noise. Nothing overly perfect to trigger suspicion. But the most important layer is not in the computer. It is in the victim's mind. The human brain follows an unspoken rule. When forced to choose between verification and saving a loved one, it chooses saving first. The scammers are not trying to convince you they are your child. They put you in a situation where doubting feels like betraying your own family. Video calls are the perfect weapon for this. Text messages can be doubted. Voice calls can be hung up. But video calls create presence. They force real-time reaction. You see the face, you hear the voice, you see emotion. Your brain no longer treats this as an information exchange. It treats it as a crisis unfolding right in front of you. That is why these scenarios always come with unspoken rules. Do not hang up. Do not call back. Do not ask anyone else. Each rule serves one purpose only: to isolate the victim from any source of verification. When you are alone with your emotions, the scammer has already won half the battle. Many families believe they would notice something off, but they forget that the brain is not trained to detect deception under stress. It is trained to solve problems as quickly as possible. In this case, the problem is presented very clearly. Transfer money to end the crisis. Everything else is pushed aside. This is why official warnings in 2025 repeatedly emphasize that images and voices are no longer evidence, not because the technology is too powerful, but because it strikes at the oldest human weakness: family bonds and urgency. And once you understand this mechanism, you see that this family's story is not an exception, it is a template. And once a template exists, it can be reused on any family with enough public data and enough love to be exploited. In the next part, we will examine how scammers operate minute by minute during those 40 minutes. Not to retell the story, but to dissect the strategy that makes victims convince themselves to send the money. To understand why 40 minutes were enough to break a normal family, we need to view this not as an emotional story, but as an optimized process. Scammers do not act randomly. They operate like a psychological surgery, cutting away the victim's ability to verify step by step until only one option remains: sending money. The first minutes are not about persuasion, they are about shock. The call arrives unexpectedly, no time to mentally prepare. Image and voice appear simultaneously. The brain cannot switch into analytical mode. It is forced straight into emergency mode. This is when the scammer takes control of the victim's breathing. When you breathe fast, you think short. Immediately after shock comes attention locking. The person on screen keeps talking, interrupting, emphasizing that the situation is getting worse. There is no pause, no silence for the brain to reorganize information. The constant presence of a familiar face makes the victim feel that hanging up would mean abandoning their loved one in the most dangerous moment. Next comes rule setting. Do not hang up because they are watching. Do not call anyone else because it will make things worse. Do not delay because consequences will escalate. These rules are not delivered as commands. They are framed as advice for the child's own good, and that framing makes the family comply voluntarily. Once the rules are accepted, the scammer moves into execution. The story becomes concrete. How much money is needed, how to transfer it, what the deadline is. Every question is answered quickly to avoid creating gaps for doubt. Each step is broken down so the burden feels manageable. You are not sending a large sum. You are simply completing small steps to save your child. The sophistication lies in the amount chosen. It is large enough to matter, but not so large that the family feels forced to stop and seek advice. It sits in the zone where many families believe they can act immediately. Scammers understand that if the number is too high, victims will be forced to verify, so they optimize to keep you acting alone. The final minutes are the lock-in phase. Pressure increases, the voice becomes more strained, time is repeated again and again. Any question from the family is redirected to emotion. If you delay, your child will suffer consequences. If you doubt, you are making things worse. At this point, the victim is no longer deciding, they are reacting. The most frightening part is that throughout the 40 minutes, nothing the victim is asked to do feels irrational on its own. Each action appears reasonable in isolation. Only when you look back at the entire chain do you see how you were led. And once the money leaves the account, the chain disappears. The call ends, the script closes. The victim is left alone with a question no one wants to face. What did I believe? This strategy does not depend on one specific family. It can be repeated endlessly. Change the face, change the voice, change the story. The rules remain the same. Attack emotion. Isolate the victim. Apply time pressure. Let them convince themselves. In the next part, we move from strategy to consequences. Not just the money lost, but what happens in the months that follow for this family and for many others like them. When the call ended, the family did not immediately realize they had been scammed. The first thing they felt was emptiness, an unnatural silence after 40 minutes of constant tension. No more urgent voice, no more panicked face on the screen, just the familiar room and silent phones. They called back, no answer. They sent messages, no response. In the first few minutes, their brains were still trying to protect the belief that what had happened was real, that their son was busy. That some process was still unfolding. That belief only collapsed when one family member walked into the bedroom and saw him there, asleep, peaceful, completely unaware that his face and voice had just been used to control his own family. That moment did not feel cinematic. There was no screaming, no immediate panic, only paralysis. The brain needs time to accept a reality that contradicts every prior experience. The person they had just seen in the police station did not exist, but the consequences did. The days that followed were filled with layered emotions: guilt, shame, anger, not only toward the scammers, but toward themselves. Each family member asked the same questions. Why did we not stop? Why did we not hang up? Why did we not call the familiar number? Those questions did not recover the money, but they eroded trust within the family. The problem did not end with the money lost. The family began to fear that more of their information had been exposed. Someone knew their phone numbers. Someone knew their relationships. Someone may have been collecting their data for a long time. Every unknown call afterward felt threatening. Every video call was viewed with suspicion. For months, they avoided talking about the incident with others, not because they did not want to warn people, but because shame kept them silent. And that silence is exactly what allows these scams to continue spreading. Victims do not speak. Scammers face no resistance. What stands out is that this family was not uninformed. They knew about scams, they had heard about deepfakes, but that knowledge was not designed to be used in 40 minutes of crisis. It stayed dormant until it was too late. Their story represents a new reality. The greatest damage is not the number in the bank account. It is the fact that a tool created to connect families has now become something that makes them doubt the faces they trust most. In the next part, we step away from this personal story to look at the bigger picture. Why these incidents are not isolated accidents, but the result of a scam ecosystem growing faster than ordinary people's ability to defend themselves. Viewed alone, this case is easy to dismiss as a technological accident, but when you step back, it becomes clear that it is the product of a highly organized ecosystem where every component is optimized to exploit ordinary human weakness. This is no longer a lone scammer sitting at a computer. Behind a 40-minute video call is an entire operation. Personal data collected from social media, family videos, public clips, voice messages, voice and face cloning tools purchased or rented at low cost. Psychological scripts standardized so they can be reused across hundreds of families by changing only names and faces. Fast money transfer systems exploited to convert emotion into cash before victims can stop. In this ecosystem, scammers hold absolute advantage. They have preparation time. They have scripts. They have tools. Victims do not. Victims have 40 minutes, a panicked heart, and a brain forced to choose between verification and family. That is where the unfairness lies. Technology has advanced so fast that images and voices, once considered the strongest forms of evidence, have become weapons against people themselves. Regulations and protections always lag behind. Banks can warn, Platforms can remove content, but no system can interrupt a live video call and tell you to stay calm while your child appears to be begging for help on screen. The impact goes beyond individual families. At the community level, stories like this spread fear. People begin to distrust every call, every image, every voice. Relationships built on trust slowly erode. At the economic level, the cost of defense rises. Ordinary people must educate themselves, adopt new procedures, new habits, while scammers only need to update their tools. The most dangerous part is that the game is designed for ordinary people to lose, not because they are unintelligent, but because the rules have changed without warning. When evidence itself can be forged in real time, intuition becomes a liability. And if we continue to treat these as isolated misfortunes, the ecosystem will only expand. More families will fall into the same trap, not because they are alike, but because they share one thing: they love their families. In the final part, we turn to what remains after everything is exposed. Not fear, but how to act in a world where seeing and hearing no longer mean truth. The most uncomfortable truth this story leaves us with is very simple. Images and voices are no longer evidence. We have entered a phase where what once made you feel safest can now hurt you the fastest. This game is unfair from the start. Scammers have scripts, time, and technology. Ordinary people have only instinct and emotion. So the only way not to lose is not to trust intuition more, but to change the rules within your own family. That does not require complex technology. It requires process. A simple rule agreed on in advance. Any emergency call must be hung up and verified by calling a known number. A family password used only in real emergencies. An agreement that any demand to stay on the line and avoid verification is always a danger sign. These actions do not make you cold. They protect family bonds in a world where those bonds are being exploited. Staying calm is not a lack of care. It is the only way to help correctly. If this story unsettles you, do one thing immediately after finishing it. Share it with your family. Not to spread fear, but to agree on how to react before a crisis happens. When everyone follows the same process, 40 minutes will no longer be enough for anyone to control you. And if you want to understand how new fraud schemes operate, why they target ordinary people, and how to recognize them before it is too late, follow this channel. My goal is not to make you anxious. It is to help you avoid learning expensive lessons with your own money and trust.